There are things that watch us from the tree line, patient, quiet, and never caught on tape. You've reached true cryptid archives, where every case is real, just not officially acknowledged. If you're hearing this, it means someone kept the tape rolling. Like the video so it stays in the feed, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. I'll never forget that October evening in the Shawnee National Forest. Photography had always been my escape, a way to capture moments that spoke louder than words. That night, I was chasing the perfect shot of mist rolling through Devil's Ridge. But what I captured instead was something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. It was just after 6:30 p.m. when I set out, the sun sinking below the horizon. The forest was damp, the air cool, and a faint drizzle hung in the atmosphere. The trail was quiet, save for the crunch of my boots on fallen leaves. I remember pausing for a moment, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I brushed it off. Forests could be quiet, right? I found a clearing just off the main trail, the kind of spot that photographers dream about. Tall oaks framing the mist, their leaves shimmering with moisture. I set up my tripod and began adjusting my camera, eager to catch the interplay of fading light and dense fog. But as I fine-tuned the setting, something strange caught my eye. On a nearby tree, there were claw marks, deep, jagged gouges that ran nearly the length of the trunk. They weren't made by a bear or any animal I could think of. I snapped a photo of them, curiosity tinged with unease. The usual hum of insects and rustle of small creatures faded into absolute silence. It was as if the world had been put on mute. I froze, every instinct in my body screaming that something was wrong. Then I heard it, a heavy rustling from the trees behind me. Not the skittish sound of a deer or raccoon, but deliberate, powerful. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. Two glowing amber eyes stared back at me from the shadows. They were at least 7 feet off the ground, level with my head, despite the slight incline of the trail. My breath caught in my throat as the figure stepped into the clearing. The creature was massive, its body a twisted blend of canine and human. It stood upright, covered in dark, matted fur that clung to its muscular frame. Its elongated snout revealed sharp teeth, and its claws, long, wicked, and glinting, flexed as it moved. It was no animal I had ever seen, but it wasn't human either. I froze, my camera still in my hands. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like stone. Slowly, I raised the camera, my finger trembling as I hit the shutter. The flash lit up the clearing, and for a split second the creature recoiled, its eyes flaring brighter. The growl that followed was unearthly, low, guttural, and so deep I could feel it in my chest. It paced the edge of the clearing, its movements fluid and predatory. I yelled, waving my arms to appear larger, but the creature didn't retreat. If anything, it seemed more intrigued. Then it lunged. I stumbled backward, falling hard onto the damp ground. The creature stopped just feet away, lowering its head to sniff the air between us. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I thought it would pounce. But then something shifted. The faint hum of an approaching ATV broke through the tension. The creature's ears flicked toward the sound. It turned its head, snarled once more, and bolted into the forest with an agility that defied its size. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, gasping for breath, until 2 hunters on ATVs emerged from the trail. Their headlights washed over me, and they killed their engines as they approached. "You all right?" one of them asked, his voice tinged with concern. I saw something," I stammered. I tried to explain, but my words came out jumbled. Their skepticism was clear, but they didn't dismiss me outright. Instead, they helped me to my feet and escorted me back to the main trail. When I got home, I downloaded the photos from my camera. Most were ruined, blurred or overexposed, but one image stood out. It was grainy, taken in haste, but unmistakable. The glowing eyes, the shadowy outline of something standing upright, far too large to be a wolf or bear. I shared the photo on a cryptid enthusiast forum. Some called it fake, while others claimed it as proof of the dogman. Whatever it was, I knew the truth. Since that night, I've avoided Devil's Ridge, though its pull is hard to resist. Reports of strange howls and claw marks have continued, and the locals speak in hushed tones of the Wolfman of Shawnee. Some say it's a protector of the forest, others believe it's a predator waiting for its next victim. All I know is that I'll never forget those eyes, how they burned through the shadows, watching, judging, sparing me for reasons I may never understand. Shadows on Devil's Ridge will haunt me forever. They say fear is a state of mind you can conquer. That's what they drill into you during SEAL training. Face the unknown, dominate it. But on that cold October night in Yellowwood State Forest, fear wasn't something I could conquer. It was alive and hunting me. It was just past midnight when I started the exercise. No GPS, no weapon beyond a knife, and only a compass to navigate through the dense woods. The goal was simple: make it to a designated point by morning. The air was damp, the ground slick with fallen leaves, and the fog made it feel like the trees were closing in around me. I had no backup, no safety net. That was the point. By 2:47 a.m., something felt wrong. I'd been following a stream when the smell hit me, sickly sweet, like rotting meat left out in the rain. My training told me to freeze, so I did, switching off my flashlight and crouching low. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No insects, no rustling leaves, just the faint sound of breathing, heavy, labored, and close. I stayed still, my knife clenched tightly in my hand as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. The fog shifted, parting just enough to reveal something standing about 20 feet away. It was tall, grotesquely thin, and its skin looked like dried leather stretched over a skeleton. Its eyes glowed faintly, a dull red, like dying embers. Antlers jutted from its head, jagged and uneven as though they had been broken and regrown. It didn't move at first, just stood there, its head cocked slightly to the side as if listening. Then it stepped forward, the movement jerky, unnatural, like a marionette with tangled strings. My heart pounded, but I stayed crouched, hoping the darkness and fog would keep me hidden. Then its head snapped in my direction. Those glowing eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a cold dread I'd never experienced before. Not in combat, not in training. Slowly I rose, my blade ready. It mimicked me, rising in the same slow, deliberate motion, its head tilting as if it were studying me. When I stepped to the side, it mirrored the movement. I crouched lower, and it did the same. And then it screamed. The sound ripped through the stillness, primal and raw, like metal grinding against bone. It made my chest vibrate, my ears ring. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I held my ground. The creature lunged, moving faster than I thought possible. I dove to the side, its claws narrowly missing me as they raked deep gouges into a nearby tree. Bark exploded like shrapnel. I scrambled to my feet and slashed at its arm. The blade barely broke the skin, but the creature recoiled, its black tar-like blood dripping to the ground. The smell was worse than the rot in the air, so vile it made my eyes water. It turned on me again, faster this time. I stumbled over a root and hit the ground hard. Before I could recover, it loomed over me, its glowing eyes burning into mine. Its maw opened impossibly wide, revealing jagged teeth, and I braced myself, knife raised feebly between us. Then, bang! The crack of a gunshot split the night. The creature flinched, a guttural growl emanating from its chest as it turned toward the sound. Another shot rang out, and the creature staggered back, retreating into the fog with unnerving speed. Its glowing eyes the last thing to vanish into the mist. I lay there for a moment, stunned, before a man emerged from the darkness, a hunter, rifle in hand. "You okay?" he asked, his voice steady but his eyes wary. I nodded, still catching my breath. "Did you see it?" I managed to croak. "See what?" he asked, scanning the trees. "I just heard screaming. Thought it might be a cougar." I didn't bother explaining. The ichor on my knife had already evaporated, leaving nothing but a foul residue. Whatever had just happened, I knew it wasn't a cougar. We made our way back to civilization together, the hunter leading the way. He talked about local wildlife and how the fog played tricks on your mind. I let him talk, but my thoughts were elsewhere, back in the forest with those glowing eyes and that scream. I didn't sleep that night or for many nights after. Even now, years later, the memories haunt me. Every so often I hear about hikers disappearing in Yellowwood or strange sounds echoing through the trees. Locals whisper about the Wendigo, a creature that preys on the lost and the lonely. The part that chills me the most? As the hunter and I left the woods that night, I swear I heard my own voice, low and rasping, calling my name from somewhere deep in the fog. I didn't turn back, and I never will. I don't scare easily. Spending years alone in the woods working as a lumberjack, you learn to take strange noises and shadows in stride. But what I saw that night at Pikes Peak State Park is something I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. It was late autumn, and I'd been hired to clear storm-felled trees along one of the park's lesser-used trails. It wasn't unusual for me to work at night. Quiet hours suited me, and I didn't mind the dark. Around 3 a.m., I was deep into the job. My chainsaw had just sputtered out, and I stood by a massive pine that had split clean in two during the last storm. The air was heavy with fog, the kind that turns even familiar woods into an alien world. I'd planned to finish up this tree and call it a night, but then I felt it. An odd vibration in the ground beneath my boots. It wasn't like the rumble of distant thunder or the tremor of heavy equipment. It was rhythmic, almost like a low drum beat, resonating through the soil. I straightened up, scanning the fog. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding far too small in the dense silence. No answer came, but then I saw it. A flicker of green light, just ahead in the trees. At first I thought it might be a flashlight, maybe a ranger checking on me. But the light wasn't steady. It pulsed, moving between the trees with a strange fluidity. I stepped closer, leaving my tools behind. "Who's there?" I called again. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my chest now, and that's when it stepped into view. I froze. The thing towered over me, at least 8 feet tall, its limbs elongated and angular like the twisted branches of a tree. Its body shimmered with an eerie green bioluminescence that pulsed faintly in the mist. The skin, or was it bark, was a mottled mix of mossy greens and blacks, and it glistened as if coated in sap. But its eyes were what held me, the size of dinner plates, multifaceted like an insect's, glowing faintly in the fog. It moved closer, its long claw-like appendages brushing the ground. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. The creature turned its head toward the fallen tree I'd been working on. For a moment, it simply stared, then reached out with one of its limbs. The sound of creaking wood filled the air as vines and roots sprouted from its arm, latching onto the tree's severed trunk. I could only watch, dumbstruck, as the creature began to pull the trunk upright, its movements slow and deliberate. The vines twisted and curled around the base, reattaching it as if the storm damage had never happened. Then I heard it, a sharp guttural sound from deeper in the woods. 2 more figures emerged, slightly smaller but otherwise identical to the first. They stopped a few yards away, watching me with those same glowing eyes. I gripped the axe I still carried, though my hands were trembling so badly I wasn't sure I could swing it if I tried. One of the smaller creatures tilted its head, mimicking my movement. I took a step back and it mirrored me again. Then the largest one let out a shrill cry, louder than anything I'd ever heard. The sound cut through the fog like a blade, and I felt it in my chest. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The 3 creatures began to circle me, their glowing forms creating an eerie halo of light in the mist. I shouted, loud, desperate, primal. It wasn't a threat, just an attempt to break whatever spell they'd cast on me. To my surprise, it worked. The largest creature stopped, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. After a moment, it made a low, resonant hum. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, the creatures turned and melted back into the fog. For a long time, I stood there staring at the empty forest. The silence felt heavier than the fog. When I finally found the strength to move, I bolted back to my truck, leaving my tools behind. The next morning, after a restless night, I returned to the site. I didn't know what I expected to find, but it wasn't this. The fallen tree was upright, its base wrapped in fresh roots. Deep claw-like marks gouged the nearby trunks, and a sticky sap-like residue clung to the bark. I told the park rangers, but they just nodded politely and wrote me off as sleep-deprived. That evening, I shared my story at a nearby tavern. An older man leaned in close and whispered, "You've seen the Green Watchers. Guardians of the forest. They don't take kindly to outsiders cutting their land." I haven't been back to Pikes Peak since. Something about those creatures felt ancient, protective, and intelligent. Sometimes, though, I catch myself staring at the woods when the fog rolls in, wondering if they're watching, and I wonder if they'll ever let me forget. I'll never forget the night I saw her. Mushroom Rock State Park had always been a familiar place to me, a stretch of wilderness I'd hunted countless times. I thought I knew every trail, every shadow cast by its towering sandstone formations. But October 13th, 2017 changed all of that. The evening had started like any other. I was alone, tracking deer under a gray sky. A light drizzle was falling, and the thick fog rolling in from the hills made everything eerily quiet. The usual sounds of the forest, chirping crickets, rustling leaves, were absent, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I had just crouched near a fresh set of tracks when I smelled it. At first, I thought it might have been a wildflower I didn't recognize, but the scent was too strong, almost chokingly sweet. It was floral and oddly comforting, but there was something unnatural about it, as if it didn't belong in the damp woods. I stood up, scanning the foggy trees, when I heard the hum. It started low, like a faint melody carried on the wind, and it grew louder as I moved toward it. It wasn't a song exactly, but it stirred something primal in me. A mix of curiosity and dread. My steps slowed as the humming shifted into whispers, indistinct and chilling. I couldn't make out words, but I had the unnerving sense that the whispers knew me, that they were calling my name. And then I saw her. She was little more than a flicker at first, a pale shape gliding between the trees. I thought it was a trick of the fog, but when she stepped into the clearing ahead of me, there was no mistaking her. The Lady of the Woods. She was tall and thin, with a tattered white dress that seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight filtering through the clouds. Her face was hidden behind long, matted hair, but her eyes burned an unnatural green that pierced through the darkness. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I could only stand there as she tilted her head, almost curiously, and raised one skeletal hand. She pointed deeper into the woods to a gap between the trees where the shadows seemed to twist and writhe. The whispers in my head grew louder, and I swear I could hear my name now, spoken in a voice that was both beautiful and horrifying. I don't know if it was her or something inside me, but my feet began to move. I wasn't walking, I was being pulled, my body no longer under my control. Around me, the air seemed to glow with floating green orbs, each one pulsing in time with the whispers. The lady hovered ahead of me, her movements slow and deliberate, her gaze never leaving mine. I wanted to scream, to grab my bow, to do anything, but I was powerless. When she reached out with that skeletal hand, inches from my face, the hum rose to a deafening crescendo. I knew if she touched me, I'd never leave the woods again. I would become hers. Desperation surged through me. With the last shred of willpower I had, I dropped to my knees, clamped my eyes shut, and whispered a prayer. My body trembled uncontrollably as I muttered every word I could remember, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The wind howled suddenly, tearing through the trees like a living thing. Leaves and dirt swirled around me, and the whispers turned into an ear-splitting wail before cutting off entirely. When the wind died, I opened my eyes, terrified of what I might see. She was gone. The green orbs had disappeared, and the forest sounds returned as if the woods had exhaled after holding their breath. I staggered to my feet, adrenaline and fear coursing through me, and stumbled out of the woods. I left my bow and pack behind, too shaken to care about anything except escaping. The next morning, I convinced a couple of friends to come back with me. The fog had lifted, and the woods seemed ordinary again. We found my gear, but my arrows were scattered around as if someone or something had gone through them. On the ground near where I had seen her were faint footprints, barefoot and far too small to belong to anyone who might have been wandering the woods. For weeks I couldn't sleep. The nightmares were relentless. Her glowing eyes, her whispers, her skeletal hand reaching for me. I spent hours digging into local legends and found stories about the Lady of the Woods. People said she was the ghost of a pioneer woman who lost her family in the wilderness and went mad. She's said to appear to those who are alone in the woods, calling them to join her eternal solitude. I haven't been back to Mushroom Rock State Park at night since then. I'd like to believe I escaped her, but sometimes, on quiet nights, I hear a familiar hum outside my window, and I wonder if I really did. It was a little after midnight, October 14th, 2017, when I found myself deep in the Daniel Boone National Forest, following a narrow dirt path illuminated only by the beam of my flashlight. A hiker had been reported missing earlier in the day, and though the official search was set to expand at first light, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that time was running out. I volunteered to patrol the last section of a remote trail before heading back to the station. The air was crisp and quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't just the absence of people. The forest itself felt wrong. No chirping crickets, no rustling leaves, just a suffocating stillness that made me stop in my tracks. My radio crackled with static, but there were no voices, only faint whispers that sounded like they came from far away. I adjusted the volume and shook the device, chalking it up to a bad signal. Then I heard it, a low guttural growl deep enough to feel in my chest. It came from somewhere up ahead, though I couldn't pinpoint the direction. I gripped my flashlight tighter, its pale yellow beam jittering across the trees as my pulse quickened. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by a sound that froze me in place, the unmistakable snap of a branch underfoot. "Hello?" My voice came out steadier than I expected, but there was no response. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I kept walking cautiously, scanning the trees around me. My beam caught something, movement, just on the edge of the light. I stopped. Slowly, I swept the flashlight back. It was standing about 20 feet away, half hidden behind a thick oak tree. At first, I thought it was a person, but something about the shape was off. It stepped into the open and my stomach dropped. The figure was tall, impossibly so, at least 7 feet, with a gaunt, almost skeletal frame. Its skin was pale and leathery, stretched tight over its bony limbs. Its face was the worst part, human-like but distorted, as if someone had tried to sculpt a human head out of wax and left it to melt in the sun. Its eyes were empty hollows, faintly glowing red, and its mouth twisted into a grimace that seemed almost amused. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice cracking slightly. The creature tilted its head, mimicking the angle of mine. Then it did something that sent a chill racing down my spine. It repeated my words. "Who's there?" The voice was my own, but warped and raspy, as if it had been passed through a broken speaker. I took a step back, and it did the same. I raised my flashlight higher, and it mimicked the movement perfectly. Every action I took, it mirrored. The beam flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, I was plunged into darkness. When the light steadied again, the thing was closer, now only 10 feet away. Its head tilted again, more curious than hostile, and it let out another growl. Then it lunged. I stumbled backward, falling onto the dirt path as the flashlight clattered out of my hands. The creature loomed over me, its glowing eyes boring into mine. It leaned down, its face inches from mine, and rasped a single word. "Leave." The sound wasn't a growl this time, it was a command in my voice, but with a depth and malice that made my blood run cold. Somehow I scrambled to my feet, fumbling for the flashlight. When I managed to grab it, I swung the beam toward the creature. The light hit empty space. It was gone. No rustling of leaves, no sound of retreat, just the silent, empty forest. I didn't wait to question it. I ran, my breath ragged, my legs screaming with every step. My radio was still crackling with static, and I thought I could hear faint whispers beneath the noise, but I didn't dare stop to listen. The truck was half a mile away, and every shadow seemed to move as I sprinted toward safety. When I finally reached the vehicle, I jumped in and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I fumbled to start the engine. The headlights pierced the darkness as I sped down the trail, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. When I reached the station, I stayed locked inside until dawn. The next day, I went back to the area with a colleague, but the forest felt different in the daylight. We found deep claw marks etched into a tree and a foul-smelling residue in the dirt where the creature had stood. The missing hiker was never found, and the search was quietly called off a week later. I spoke to a few locals about what I saw, and the older ones nodded knowingly. They told me about skinwalkers, shape-shifting entities from Navajo legend, though they rarely heard of sightings this far east. One elder warned me to never whistle in the woods at night and handed me a silver-bladed knife, saying, "Just in case." I haven't been back to that trail at night, and I never patrol alone anymore. Sometimes I hear reports of strange howls and sightings in that area, and I can't help but wonder if it's still out there, watching, waiting. It was a bitterly cold October night, October 12, 1997 to be exact. The clock on my truck's dashboard glowed 2:17 a.m. as I pulled up to a trailhead deep in Shawnee National Forest. A group of campers had reported strange noises, whispers, they said. And while most of these calls turned out to be wind or wildlife, my job as a park ranger meant I had to check it out. Grabbing my flashlight and radio, I stepped into the dense mist. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Normally the night would be alive with the sounds of crickets, distant owls, and the rustling of small creatures. But tonight the silence pressed in like a weight. My flashlight beam seemed to struggle against the fog, barely illuminating the trail ahead. The air was damp and carried a chill that crept into my bones. That's when it began. First, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath turned to puffs of white in the air, and my fingers grew numb despite my gloves. Then I heard it, faint whispers drifting on the mist. I stopped, turning my head to pinpoint the source, but the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My pulse quickened. I took a step forward, calling out, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer, only the whispers growing louder now. A shiver ran down my spine as I scanned the woods. That's when I saw it, a shimmer like heat rising off asphalt, except it was night and the air was freezing. It hovered on the trail ahead, barely visible through the fog. I raised my flashlight, aiming the beam toward the distortion. As it grew closer, its shape solidified. The figure was tall and human-like, but translucent, as though made of smoke. Its face was a blur, and its eyes glowed faintly like dying embers. It glided forward without a sound, the whispers following in its wake. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My legs felt rooted to the spot. I tried to call out again, but my voice caught in my throat. The specter, it was the only word that fit, tilted its head, a gesture eerily human, before continuing toward me. My flashlight flickered, its beam faltering. Then my radio crackled to life, spewing static. I reached for it reflexively, but instead of the usual dispatcher's voice, I heard faint music. A slow, mournful Cajun folk song. My heart pounded as the specter stopped just a few feet away, its hollow eyes boring into mine. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. The specter didn't answer. Instead, it began circling me, moving with unnerving smoothness. The whispers grew into wails, agonized cries that filled the air around me. My flashlight failed entirely, plunging me into darkness. I spun around trying to keep track of the entity, but it moved faster than I could follow. Then it lunged. The specter passed through me, and the cold was like nothing I'd ever felt. An icy blast that seemed to freeze my very soul. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the ground, gasping for air. In that instant, my mind was flooded with images. A man wandering the forest, his face etched with sorrow. He clutched a photograph to his chest, tears streaming down his cheeks, before collapsing to his knees and disappearing into the mist. The whispers stopped, and the forest was silent once more. My flashlight flickered back on, its beam now steady. I scrambled to my feet, shaking uncontrollably. The radio was silent, the strange music gone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and stumbled back to the trailhead, my legs like jelly. Back at the ranger station, I couldn't shake the experience. I tried to rationalize it, but nothing fit. Over the following days, I dug into local lore and discovered the story of a man who had disappeared in Kisatchie decades ago. A widower, they said, who had wandered into the forest, heartbroken after losing his wife to illness. Some believed his spirit still roamed, searching for what he had lost. Since that night, I've heard occasional reports from hikers, whispers in the woods, an unexplainable chill, even glimpses of a translucent figure. I still patrol Kisatchie, but I avoid that trail at night. The memory of the specter's touch, the overwhelming sorrow, stays with me, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that dwell in the depths of the forest. Some say it's a ghost, others a shadow of grief itself. Me, I don't know. All I know is that I'll never forget the specter of Kisatchie National Forest. I've spent years working in the wilderness, documenting nocturnal creatures and their habitats. Acadia National Park, with its dense forests and vibrant ecosystems, has always been one of my favorite places to work. But after what happened last September, it's also become the place that haunts my dreams. The evening had started like any other field survey. The rain had stopped earlier in the afternoon, leaving the air heavy and damp. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest came alive in shades of deep purple and orange. I was finishing up my rounds, checking the last motion-activated camera I'd set near a small brook. The usual nighttime chatter of small creatures filled the air, and I was already thinking about heading back to the cabin. But as I neared the camera site, something changed. The sounds of the forest faded, as if someone had turned the volume knob all the way down. No rustling leaves, no chittering of small mammals. Just silence. I froze in place, gripping the strap of my field bag tightly. Then I heard it, a low guttural growl, deep, resonant, and unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It wasn't a bear, that much I knew immediately. It sounded wet, almost like rocks grinding together underwater. Slowly, I crouched behind the thick trunk of a nearby oak, my heart hammering in my chest. Emerging from the shadows near the brook was a creature unlike anything I could have imagined. It was tall, at least 7 feet, if not more. Its body was covered in dark, leathery scales that gleamed with moisture as if the rain hadn't quite left it. Its head was elongated, with sharp ridges running along the top of its skull and 2 glowing yellow eyes that pierced through the twilight. Its mouth hung slightly open, revealing jagged teeth stained green like algae clinging to rocks. Its muscular limbs ended in massive claws, and a thick tail swayed behind it, cutting through the underbrush with each step. It was drinking from the brook, lapping at the water in quick mechanical motions. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't notice me. But when I shifted my weight, a branch beneath my boot snapped. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Its head snapped up, nostrils flaring as it fixed its gaze directly on me. Those yellow eyes locked with mine, and I felt like prey. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost as if it was studying me, deciding whether I was worth the effort. Then it hissed. The sound sent a shiver down my spine, sharp and shrill, like steam escaping from a boiling pot. Before I could react, it lunged forward, its claws ripping into the ground as it charged. Instinct took over and I turned and ran, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The forest was a blur around me as I sprinted, the sound of its pursuit too close for comfort. Branches whipped at my face, mud sucked at my boots, but I didn't dare slow down. Behind me, I heard the scrape of claws and the heavy thud of its tail as it crashed through the undergrowth. Ahead, a fallen log blocked the path. I leapt over it, landing hard on the other side and skidding into the mud. Scrambling to my feet, I ducked behind the log, hoping the creature would lose sight of me. For a moment, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. I peered over the log, just enough to see the creature standing on the other side. It sniffed the air, its head swiveling as it scanned the area. Its tail flicked sharply, stirring up leaves and dirt. Then, somewhere in the distance, a sharp cry, a bird maybe, caught its attention. The creature's head snapped in the direction of the sound, and without another glance, it turned and disappeared into the shadows. I waited for what felt like an eternity before I dared to move. My legs trembled as I stood, and my hands shook as I retrieved my field camera from where I'd dropped it. The device was still running, but I didn't stop to review the footage. I needed to get out of there. Back at the cabin, safe behind a locked door, I finally looked at the footage. My breath caught as I paused on a single frame. There it was, the creature's glowing yellow eyes and part of its scaled body, blurred but unmistakable. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The next day, I returned to the brook in daylight, armed with plaster to cast the massive clawed footprints I'd seen near the log. I didn't linger, though. The forest still felt wrong, too quiet, too still. When I told a park ranger about the encounter, he didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded grimly. "You've seen the scaled shadow," he said. "It's been spotted here before, mostly near water. Folks say it's been around for centuries. It doesn't usually bother people, but, well, you're lucky." Lucky. I've heard that word a lot since that night, but it doesn't feel right. I still wake up sometimes, sweating, the sound of that hiss ringing in my ears. I haven't gone back to that part of the park, and I don't think I ever will. But sometimes when the night is quiet and the world feels too still, I find myself wondering, is it still out there, watching, waiting? And what would have happened if it hadn't gotten distracted? I'm not sure I want to know. Cedarville State Forest, October 12, 2023. That night is etched into my memory like a burn scar, permanent, painful, and all too vivid. I was the last one left, as usual. The team had packed up hours ago, trusting me to monitor the controlled burn area overnight. The fire was out, but we couldn't risk embers reigniting. The forest around me was soaked from the earlier rain, heavy with the scent of damp leaves and scorched wood. My headlamp cut through the fog in narrow beams, revealing glistening pine needles and the occasional tangle of underbrush. The stillness was unnerving. Normally, the forest at night is alive with sound, crickets, distant owls, the occasional rustle of a curious raccoon. But as I moved through the area, everything seemed wrong. The usual forest symphony had gone silent, replaced by a deep, resonant hum. It wasn't a sound I could pinpoint. It felt like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stopped scanning the trees with my flashlight. "Hello?" My voice felt small, swallowed by the mist. I told myself it was probably just the fog playing tricks on me, distorting sound, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something was watching me. I could feel it. That's when I saw it. A shadow at first, barely distinguishable from the trees. I flicked my headlamp toward the movement, and it froze. My breath caught. It wasn't a deer or a bear. It was something else. The creature stepped into the light and my stomach turned cold. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall and humanoid in shape, but its body was covered in black, glossy plates that glistened like wet stone. Its head was elongated, insect-like, with mandibles that clicked softly as it moved. But the eyes, God, those eyes. They glowed faintly amber, not reflecting the light, but emitting their own eerie luminescence. I didn't move, neither did the thing. We stood there, locked in some unspoken standoff. My hand slowly crept toward the flare at my belt. As I moved, the creature tilted its head, mimicking me like a grotesque mirror. Its mandibles twitched, clicking faster now. "Stay back," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I struck the flare, and its bright red glow cast jagged shadows across the fog. I threw it toward the creature, hoping to scare it off. The flare landed at its feet, and it crouched, examining the fire with a disturbing curiosity. Its long, clawed fingers hovered over the flame as though testing it. Then it turned its eyes back to me, the amber glow intensifying. It let out a growl, not loud but deep, vibrating through my chest like the hum of heavy machinery. I stumbled backward, tripping over a branch and landing hard on my back. The creature loomed over me now, its claws extended, its mandibles clicking rhythmically. I scrambled for my radio, fumbling with shaking hands. My voice cracked, "I need backup, something's out here." The creature froze, tilting its head again as if it understood me. For a moment I thought it was going to strike, but then it straightened to its full height and turned. With an almost supernatural speed, it vanished into the fog, leaving me alone in the sudden, oppressive silence. I didn't move until I heard the distant shouts of my team and the crunch of their boots on the forest floor. When they found me, I was still on the ground, clutching my radio like a lifeline. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come out the way I intended. They found claw marks in a nearby tree, deep, precise gouges too large for any known animal. There was also a viscous, tar-like substance smeared on the bark. Samples were taken, but as far as I know, no lab could identify it. A retired ranger later told me about Oksoni, a figure from Algonquin legend, a guardian of the forest that appears in times of imbalance. He said people had whispered about strange sightings in Cedarville for decades, but no one had ever described anything like what I saw. I left Cedarville State Forest not long after. I told my boss it was for personal reasons, but the truth is, I couldn't stand to be in those woods again. Even now, when I walk through forests closer to home, I find myself looking over my shoulder, scanning the shadows for amber eyes. I haven't seen it since, but sometimes in the dead of night I hear that low, resonant hum in my dreams. And every time I wake up with the same thought. It wasn't done watching me. It was a humid, overcast night in mid-August, and the forest felt alive in a way I always found comforting. The rhythmic chirp of crickets mixed with the faint rustle of leaves swaying in the gentle rain. I was deep in Pittsfield State Forest, my camera on a tripod and my lens focused on capturing the ephemeral glow of fireflies. The shutter clicked steadily as I adjusted settings, each frame freezing a moment in time. I was so absorbed in my work that I almost missed the change. The sounds of the forest, the crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, abruptly ceased. It wasn't a gradual fading, it was as though someone had thrown a switch. The silence was unnerving, thick and heavy, as if the woods were holding their breath. Then I smelled it. An acrid metallic tang, sharp enough to sting my nostrils. I straightened, scanning the darkened trees. A flicker of light caught my attention, faint and blue-green, deep within the underbrush. It wasn't fireflies, it was too steady, too deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight, hesitating only a moment before stepping off the trail and toward the light. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the forest itself were resisting me. The smell grew stronger, and so did the light, pulsing faintly in the darkness. The creature was impossibly tall, at least 8 feet, with a thin, elongated body that seemed translucent. Its skin shimmered, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface, and its head was massive, its features dominated by 2 enormous slanted eyes. They pulsed softly, like a heartbeat of light. Surrounding it were appendages, not arms or legs, but shifting, tendril-like structures that floated unnaturally, as though unbound by gravity. I couldn't breathe. My flashlight flickered and went out. My camera, mounted on the tripod behind me, started to click erratically, its LED display flashing wild patterns before dying completely. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as the creature turned its glowing eyes toward me. A low hum filled the air, resonating deep in my chest, making my teeth vibrate. One of its appendages extended toward me, stopping mere inches from my face. The air grew warm and the hum deepened. My vision blurred as images, no, memories or something more alien, flooded my mind. I saw vast alien landscapes bathed in the light of twin suns. Stars stretched endlessly, and I felt an overwhelming awareness of being watched, as if the universe itself were looking back at me. I don't know how long I stood there, locked in this strange communion. Seconds? Minutes? Time seemed meaningless. My legs buckled and I dropped to one knee. The hum shifted to a series of clicks and whirs, almost musical, as if the creature were speaking. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The creature's appendages retracted and the light around it dimmed. It turned away, gliding soundlessly into the forest. The moment it disappeared, the sounds of the woods returned, timid at first, then swelling to their full familiar chorus. My body trembled as I staggered back to my tripod. My camera wouldn't turn on no matter how many times I pressed the button. I pulled the memory card, slipping it into my pocket, and made my way back to the car, barely able to steady my steps. When I got home, I loaded the memory card into my computer. The images were corrupted, filled with strange, jagged streaks of light and faint, unreadable symbols. The camera itself never worked again. A week later, I returned to the site during the day. The spot where the creature had stood was unmistakable. The ground was burned in a perfect circle, and the vegetation inside was brittle and blackened. When I mentioned my encounter to a local hiking group, they dismissed me outright, except for one old man. "People have been seeing strange lights in these woods for decades," he said. "They call it the phantom. Some say it's a spirit, others say it's something not from here. I haven't seen the creature again, but I think about it every day. I'll never forget the way it looked at me, not with malice, but with a kind of curiosity, almost recognition. Whatever it wasn't of this world. It left me with questions I'll never answer and a truth I'll never deny. We are not alone." It was 2:45 in the morning on October 15th, 2017, deep in the woods of Isle Royale National Park. The mist was thick, curling through the towering spruce trees like some living thing. I was on a solo night exercise, part of my Navy SEAL training regimen to navigate rugged terrain under the cloak of darkness. My gear was light, a rifle, night vision goggles, and a knife, but it was enough to make me feel prepared for any danger this island could throw at me, or so I thought. The night was uneventful at first. I moved quietly, logging coordinates and mapping trails while listening to the forest's rhythm, the rustle of leaves, the occasional distant hoot of an owl, the faint crashing of Lake Superior waves. Then, without warning, the forest fell silent. Not a single chirp or crackle, just silence so thick it pressed on my ears. It was as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. A foul stench hit me next, metallic and sour like blood and rot mingled together. I froze, scanning the darkness through my goggles. My heart thudded against my ribcage, a visceral warning that something wasn't right. And then I heard it, a low, guttural growl. It wasn't a bear, nor was it a wolf. This sound was something altogether different, primal and angry. I dropped into a crouch, gripping my rifle tightly. Movement flickered at the edge of my vision, a shadow darting between the trees, too fast for me to track. Whatever it was big, and it was circling me. The ghoul, was almost 7 feet tall. Its skeletal frame, draped in gray, corpse-like skin, stretched tight over jagged bones. Its face was the stuff of nightmares, sunken eye sockets that glowed faintly red, a mouth impossibly wide and filled with jagged yellowed teeth. Its hands were clawed, the fingers long and grotesquely thin. It stood there, hunched slightly, its head tilting as though studying me. I didn't move, I didn't even breathe. My camouflage might have helped me blend into the environment, but something told me this creature wasn't relying on sight alone. Then I shifted my rifle just slightly, and its head snapped toward me with unnatural speed. Those glowing eyes locked onto mine, and it let out a shriek so high-pitched it felt like knives slicing through my skull. It lunged. I fired a shot, the rifle's crack shattering the silence. The bullet grazed the creature, making it stagger briefly, but not enough to stop it. It darted back into the shadows, faster than I could aim again. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. I kept scanning, pivoting to track its movements. Every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of it between the trees, watching me, waiting. When it attacked again, it came from my blind spot. I barely managed to throw myself backward as it swiped at me, its claws tearing through the air inches from my chest. Scrambling to my feet, I fumbled for the flashlight strapped to my vest. I clicked it on and aimed the powerful beam at the creature. The reaction was immediate. It screeched, a sound of rage and pain, shielding its face with its claws as it stumbled back. I took the opportunity to climb onto a nearby boulder, using the elevation to scan my surroundings. The ghoul lingered at the edge of the clearing, pacing and snarling, its red eyes burning with fury. For what felt like hours, we were locked in a standoff. But as the first faint light of dawn broke through the trees, the ghoul retreated. It melted back into the shadows, its glowing eyes the last thing to vanish. I didn't leave that boulder until the sun was fully up. When I finally made it back to camp, I was shaken but alive. I reported the encounter to my commanding officer, but he dismissed it as stress-induced hallucinations. I didn't argue. What was the point? I had no proof beyond the claw marks left on a tree near where I'd been attacked, and a foul-smelling residue on the ground. Later, I heard about local legends from a park ranger. The Ojibwa people had stories of a shadow eater, a creature that prowled the woods at night, preying on the lost and unwary. Other visitors had reported strange sounds and glimpses of something unnatural, but nothing definitive. To this day, I don't know what I encountered on Isle Royale. Was it a cryptid, a spirit, something else entirely? All I know is that I came face to face with it, and it left a scar in my mind that I'll carry forever. The forest isn't just a wilderness, it's a place of mysteries, and some of those mysteries are better left undisturbed. I've been a lumberjack most of my life, and the forest has always been my sanctuary. But there are things in the woods, things that defy reason. And one night in October 1982, I found myself face to face with something I still can't explain. We were behind schedule at the logging site, so I stayed late to finish clearing a section of the Grand Portage State Forest. The floodlights cast long, flickering shadows across the clearing, barely holding back the darkness. The generator had been acting up all day, sputtering and threatening to quit, so when it started dying again, I went over to fix it. I leaned my axe against a tree and knelt down beside the machine, muttering curses under my breath. That's when the forest went quiet, completely silent. No owls, no rustling leaves, not even the sound of dripping water from the rain earlier that evening. It was like the world had hit pause. Then I heard it. A low mechanical hum coming from somewhere in the trees. It wasn't like any machine I'd ever heard. The sound seemed to pulse, vibrating through my chest. I stood up, scanning the tree line with a growing sense of unease. My eyes caught movement, a figure emerging from the mist. At first I thought it was a person, maybe one of the crew coming to check on me, but as it stepped closer I realized I was wrong. The thing was tall, unnaturally tall, with limbs that stretched like shadows in the floodlight. Its skin had a metallic sheen, gleaming like polished steel, and its head was large and oval-shaped. Its eyes were the worst part, huge, almond-shaped and glowing faintly like embers in the dark. There was no mouth, no nose, just those piercing eyes that locked onto me like a predator sizing up its prey. It stopped at the edge of the clearing, tilting its head as if studying me. Then it turned its attention to the generator. With one long, spindly arm, it traced a circle in the air. The generator sputtered and died instantly, and the floodlights flickered out, plunging me into darkness. The only light left was the faint glow from the creature's eyes. I froze, every instinct in me screaming to run, but I couldn't move. My body felt like it was locked in place. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and I could feel it in my skull, vibrating through my bones. Images started flashing in my mind. Alien landscapes, strange star patterns, and towering structures of glass and metal. They came so fast I couldn't process them, like my brain was being overloaded. Desperation broke through my paralysis, and I stumbled toward the tree where I'd left my axe. The creature tilted its head again, as if it understood what I was doing. As my hand closed around the axe handle, it stepped forward, emitting a sound like a low drone that made my teeth ache. I swung the axe with everything I had, but it passed right through the creature, like swinging at smoke. The thing let out a piercing sound, not a scream exactly, but a high-pitched tone that made my ears ring. Then its body lit up with an intense blue glow that illuminated the entire clearing. I shielded my eyes, but the light was so bright it burned through my eyelids. When I dared to look again, the creature was inches from me, its glowing eyes boring into mine. It raised one long, sharp finger and brushed the edge of my shirt. My whole body went cold, like I'd been plunged into icy water. My mind felt invaded, like it was reaching inside me, pulling at something I didn't even know I had. I screamed, a raw, primal sound, and stumbled backward. That must have startled it, because in an instant, it shot straight up into the sky, vanishing into the clouds with a streak of blue light. The hum faded, the generator sputtered back to life, and the floodlights blinked on. The forest sounds returned, but everything felt wrong, like the woods had shifted somehow, become something I didn't recognize. I didn't waste any time getting out of there. Back in the cabin, I sat shaking for hours, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the encounter, the images it had shown me, the freezing touch. The next morning, I returned to the clearing, half hoping it had all been some kind of hallucination. But there, near the generator, was a perfect circle of scorched grass about 3 feet wide. Nothing ever grew there again. When I told the other loggers, most of them laughed it off, saying I'd had too much whiskey or let my imagination run wild. But a few didn't. One of the older guys said the Ojibwe had stories about sky people who came down from the stars. Others mentioned strange lights they'd seen in the area, though no one had ever admitted seeing anything like what I described. Decades later, I still dream about it. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, hearing that mechanical hum in my head. I don't know what it was or why it came to me that night. All I know is that the forest was never the same after that, and neither was I. Whatever it was, it's still out there, and someone else is bound to see it. If this report hit close to home, hit like. Drop your stories in the comments and subscribe to True Cryptid Archives. Tap the notification bell and you'll be the first to know when the next one surfaces.